Good morning, everyone, and welcome to your introduction to the retrofit strategy for our homes in the Northeast. Today is about understanding homes in the region, who needs support, what retrofit means, and how we can work together to build a system to make homes warmer, healthier, and more affordable to run. This is your chance to hear how you can get involved more in developing a strategy to improve homes in the region, whether you're a resident, a landlord, a skills provider, a trader, or anyone else involved in home improvements. So just some housekeeping before we continue. All attendees are muted at the moment, but we can unmute you if you want to ask any questions, but you can post your questions to me in the chat. We've got somebody monitoring the questions there, so we can respond to them directly, or we'll pick them up at the end. There's an opportunity to answer questions at the end, and there's plenty of time for that. The other thing to note is this event is being recorded. It'll be made available after for you to watch back at your leisure and for you to circulate to people who might not have been able to attend today. Obviously, let us know if you don't want your questions or your voice appearing in that recording, and we can cut that out if needed. Just drop us a line after. Okie dokie. So housekeeping out of the way. So welcome. This is the start of the retrofit strategy development for our homes in the Northeast. Before we go into the main bulk of this webinar, just a little bit about who I am and who we are. So my name's Annalisa. I'm a principal consultant at Urban Foresight. So we are the UK's leading place-based innovation consultancy. We work around a load of different projects in the UK. We work to improve lives, protect the environment, and create new economic opportunities within all the projects that we deliver. Those are the areas that you can see on the map where we work in our team specifically, but we work wider than that across the business. So we're specialists in whole systems change and engagement and strategy development. And as you can see, we've supported a lot of local authorities. We've supported about 50 odd authorities and public sector bodies across the UK and Ireland over the last 5 years. And we aim to design strategies that are practical and support implementation and work with people who are delivering on the ground. So that's really our aim. I'm also joined by Oliver Hart, who is one of our consultants in our team as well, who is leading a lot of the data analysis side of things and engagement moving forward. Okie dokie. So in today's short webinar, we're going to be asking a few pertinent questions that I'm sure you've joined to hear about today. So that is covering what do our homes look like and feel like in the Northeast today. We'll look at that kind of background context, the geography and the industrial history of the Northeast and the typical homes that we find in the region. We'll also explore what types of households need the most support in different ways to improve their energy use, to reduce reliance on oil and gas, and to make homes more comfortable. This is really about breaking down different groups to prioritise and looking at what's unique about them. Then we'll cover what is home retrofit, why we need it, what it is, what are the barriers at the moment to delivering it. And then we'll briefly touch on what's already on offer, what's being learned from other places that's working well elsewhere. This includes information on the Northeast Warm Home Service, as well as some new information around low interest loans that are coming up on offer from the Northeast Mayoral Strategic Authority. Then finally, we get into the question of how do we start to build this system for our region together. So there will be plenty of time for questions. Do pop in the chat, as I say, if you have any. Okie dokie. So what do our homes look like and feel like in the Northeast today? The Northeast covers a wide range of places with really different housing challenges, and that's shaped by geography and industrial history. There are nearly 1 million homes found across the region, and that covers major urban centres in Tyne and Wear, extensive rural areas in Northumberland and County Durham, some really distinctive coastal communities, and many post-industrial towns and villages that are shaped by mining and shipbuilding legacies. And this really influences the distribution of the region's population, but also the composition of its communities. For many residents, homes are not comfortable at the moment, and heating costs are high, and homes can feel cold, especially in winter. And that's because a large number of the homes across the whole area have a low EPC rating. So that means they're low energy efficiency, and that's nearly half of the homes in the region, 49%. You can see 466,000 odd homes are not really up to a decent standard. Nearly 100,000 homes are also in fuel poverty, and that's more than the national average here. So we've really got a need to support people more so in this region than any other in the country. There's also a lot of homes that aren't on mains gas, and that poses a real problem when you're trying to switch to different technologies. There's also 400 homes across the region that don't have they don't have grid electricity either, and that's particularly problematic, and they will need much more nuanced support. Nearly a quarter of homes were built before 1930 as well, and that means that a lot of homes have solid walls rather than cavity walls, so that inherently makes them harder to insulate. And I've got a diagram there just on the right hand side showing how heat loss happens in a typical home. So a lot of that happens through the walls and through the roof and the ceiling. So that's about half of all heat loss. But then you also get heat loss through glazing, through drafts generally, whether that's the letterbox or whether that's around poorly fitting windows or doors. And then you lose a lot of heat through the floor as well, and through ventilation systems that can be in place. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of aspects of the home where you lose heat, and there's a lot of ways in which that can be treated. But that is the reason that we have so many homes that need improvement to help us create warmer homes and healthier homes for people. Who owns the homes across the northeast? Well, around half of them are owner occupied, and that actually means around 290,000 of homeowners have a low EPC, so that's an EPC of D or below. 15% of the homes are owned by private landlords. Around 80,000 in total have a low EPC, and then a quarter are council or social housing, and nearly 100,000 of them also have a low EPC. So across the board, we need to be improving the housing stock, regardless of what sector we're looking at. So which of the households need most support? And I think actually the answer to that is all homes need some sort of support, and it's what support is appropriate and what type of support is needed. So we've looked at the key groups that the region might like to look at and target, and in order to help them progress with their home improvement journeys. So almost a quarter of the homes in the region have at least one feature that makes them hard to treat or hard to heat. But those that are the hardest to heat and the trickiest to improve are those residents who aren't on the gas network, who have homes with low energy efficiency, and they're often detached homes. They're often pre-1930s homes. So again, those kind of solid walls, low EPCs, as I just said. Often off gas. And the result of that is they have very high energy costs, and they don't often benefit from the price cap because they're using oil rather than mains gas. So these residents are likely to require more bespoke service with a greater number of improvements to the home to make it warmer and healthier. They'll need detailed and bespoke information and hand-holding, and a full suite of improvements is likely to be more costly for these homes than it is for others. So where are these homes? Well, they're found primarily in rural County Durham and Northumberland, but there are some smaller kind of concentrations of hard to heat, hard to treat homes in the more densely populated areas as well. But you can see the red areas on the map there show where there's the highest concentration of those hard to treat homes. So we can see those are quite remote, rural based properties. So the next group that we look at is the most vulnerable in our region, and this is not all of those have any different type of vulnerability. It's those homes who are the most vulnerable, um, and they're the ones who are most affected by the negative impacts of living in cold homes. These homes tend to be in areas where there's high density of low efficiency properties, but also high levels of poor respiratory health, um, high levels of fuel poverty, and households in child poverty as well. Um, and again, a low EPC. So these residents are going to require more urgent and direct support packages, including direct funding in the form of grants, which are currently still available. Um, and against the this particular definition, so these most vulnerable households, you can see 140 of the households across the region are categorized as those most vulnerable. But you can see on that map they're actually distributed all over the place. So there's not one particular concentration in the area. There's not one particular community where we have the most vulnerable people. It's in every one of our 7 local authority areas, and it's a lot of those different types of homes as well. So our third category is seldom heard voices. And we categorise seldom heard voices as those where there's a high concentration of households that are at risk of missing out on support to improve their homes. And that's normally as a result of social and digital exclusion, or because of the connection with local heritage and industry. So where there's the notion of just transition is most acutely felt. We've picked out the communities here that have the highest proportion of residents who are in deprived areas, who are not proficient in English, who live with disabilities, and also older people as well. They also have low EPCs. And these residents are likely to need more bespoke and targeted engagement that leverages trusted channels that are pre-existing or new trusted channels of communication and support. Those are often already embedded within the community, and that accommodates for kind of additional support when they might require extra support to access different services. And a lot of those are in those former mining communities, because of that link to heritage, because of that that need to make sure that those communities are really being supported in a just transition. And there's around 20,000 households who are in the most seldom heard communities. And you can see where those are on this map. So you can see a lot of these in Tyne and Wear, and in those former mining communities within County Durham itself. So the dark red is where we see those communities located. So our final group is the missing middle, and you can see that's an absolutely massive proportion of the homes. So 410,000 properties is our missing middle. That is around 45% of all homes across the region. These are households that fall in the low income bracket, that don't fall in the low income bracket. They have a low EPC. They often are owner occupiers. But they have household incomes of over £36,000. So they don't qualify for government grants to improve the home. But because they don't have very high incomes, they find that self-funding a range of measures to improve their home wouldn't actually be possible without some sort of loan or funding or financing. So if you live alone, you will fall into this category if your gross income is higher than £36,000. But it could be anywhere up to £93,000. If you're in a 2-person earning household or more, that joint income would be between £36,000 and £80,000. The missing middle are likely to require a lot of targeted communications as well as different financial products to support some of the home improvements that are needed. That could be in the form of some grants. For example, the boiler upgrade scheme at the moment does support the missing middle, but low interest loans and other products that like that are becoming available, and those are really looking at targeting this very, very large section of our households. And one of the important points is that this is not just one particular type of home. This is across all different types of homes. So it could be flats, could be terraces, could be detached houses. You see it across the board. Similarly, actually, the type of targeting that would be required for this missing middle is probably likely to support the minority of households that fall within those classified as able to pay. So that would be households that are earning over £93,000 as a single person, or £80,000 as a two-person household. They're also expected to require extra information, signposting, financial incentives to have confidence in the system. So where are those missing middle? Unsurprisingly, it's very, very difficult to actually map them out because it's most households. So the missing middle is really going to be found across most, if not all, of every single community in the Northeast. So in terms of the scale of the challenge, what does this look like? How many measures do we need across these different homes? So we'll go into actually what these measures are in a moment, but we just thought we'd flag here the cost of doing this. What this doesn't show is the cost benefit. So there are significant benefits of improving the home for the householder, including immediate reduction in energy bills, and improved health and other indirect benefits. So, but the actual funding that is required, or the finance that's required to put these measures in place, is quite significant when we look at the total number of homes. So by 2030, our analysis suggests that low-income households require spending of around £640 million on improvements, which represents the approximate level of combined landlord investment and means tested funding across the region. Then that missing middle that we just spoke about need around £720 million. So that's homeowners and landlords, and the able to pay need to find around £240 million to finance improvements. So that's over those large numbers of homes. But this is in quite a short period, so you can see the level of financing that is required. Just on this, the insulation that we're talking about here covers cavity wall insulation for those that haven't got cavity wall yet, and also underfloor insulation for suspended floors, properties with suspended floors. And then the solar system is looking at around 4 solar panels and with battery. And you can see that we've put in the average cost there of upgrading a heating system to heat pumps with the best grant deducted after that. So this brings us on to, okay, actually, what is retrofit? We've been talking about the reasons that we need it, but actually, what really is it, and why do we need it? So our communities have faced really unique challenges and opportunities over time. The communities in the Northeast were at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, and our region is home to the first street in the world to be lit by electricity. That was back in 1879. That's Mosley Street in Newcastle, and that was lit by electric incandescent bulbs, replacing traditional gas lamps. Shortly after that, the Swan Electric Light Company began installing light bulbs across homes in the UK. So we're really pioneers of electricity in our region, and it's something that we should be really proud of. These places have also fueled the nation with coal throughout the Industrial Revolution and powered the whole of the UK until the 1990s. And then the closure of the coal mines actually made way for new and renewable technologies that now generate most of the electricity actually that we use today. And a lot of that comes from wind farms that are found in our region, both onshore and offshore. So we have been, and we are still powering ourselves and the rest of the country. And as our industry has changed, the way we heat our homes and the way we power our homes is also changing. So we're transitioning to a model in which we enable homes to be much cleaner, much healthier, and much cheaper to live in as we move from coal to gas to electrified heating to solar panels. Um, And we also, alongside that, have got measures to reduce our energy use as well. So not only can we electrify our heating now, but we can also put in place smart controls and insulation, not only in floors, but in roofs and in walls to reduce the amount of energy we use, and to really help people reduce their energy bills. So, in a nutshell, home retrofit is really the process of improving an existing home so it's warmer, healthier, more comfortable to live in, with lower energy use, lower energy bills, and also a lesser impact on the environment. So, for each home retrofit, this might mean lower energy bills of hundreds of pounds a year. So, that could come from insulation, smart controls, electrified heating, solar panels. All of those things can help save residents money. In doing so, we also create healthier homes, particularly if we're swapping from gas heating to an electric heat pump. That means removing directly that indoor air pollution that gas boilers create. Also, the typical home, an average home, would save 2.5 tons of carbon every single year. This is really important because one of the largest proportion of uh, greenhouse gas emissions in the northeast comes from heating domestic properties. So it's one of the key drivers in our net zero journey, and there are net zero targets in place all across the region. So each home, by going to electric heating, can save around 2.5 tons of carbon each year, and that's the equivalent of driving over 6,000 miles, or going to and from Barcelona on a plane 4 times, or going to and from Barcelona on a train 280 times. So you can kind of scale the scale of the impact just on an annual basis. This is obviously increasingly important now, and I think everyone will have seen things in the news recently about energy prices and the energy price cap rising. One of the really interesting things about this is, yes, the prices are going up, but the price of gas is going up far more than the price of electricity, and that's because we've got loads more renewables on the system than we had previously. There's some other changes that have been made kind of within bills that support that shift towards lower electricity prices relative to gas. But we're seeing this more and more now with each price cap change. So back in 2022, gas prices shot up by 100%, and I think everyone will remember the impact that had. And electricity went up 83%. So they were kind of roughly going up at the same rate. Now what we're seeing is that gas prices have gone up 5 times what electricity prices have gone up. So those who are still on the gas system are likely to feel the effects more than those who are on electrified systems. So that really emphasizes the need to shift people away from gas. One of the other things that's important from the rental side is that domestic minimum energy efficiency standards, so that's MEES, which set out a minimum energy efficiency level for domestic private rental properties, is set to become more stringent. So currently, all landlords should have an EPC of E or above if they're one of the relevant tenancies, which is most rentals. And in 2030, the government aims to have an EPC-C or equivalent for all privately rented homes. So there's something that just came out in terms of guidance to landlords around this, and there's a link there on these slides for that. The government's basically committed to looking at that long-term trajectory to improving energy performance standards across homes in England and Wales. And they're currently looking at different options, different policy options following the consultations that have been out recently. So we're expecting to see further information on that later in the year. So that's obviously a really clear rationale for landlords to try and move as quickly as possible and take advantages of funding that is available to them, and any low interest loans that come on online. Another good reason to be retrofitting now, we can support a huge number of jobs across the region. So in this slide, this is really the all of the different parts of the system that support retrofit, that support home improvements. So you can see there's different skills involved there. There's training provision involved there. There's accreditations involved there. This links to social landlords, landlords themselves, owner occupiers. There's a lot of different jobs supported within the ecosystem. And down the left there, you can see the number of jobs that would be created with the level of retrofit that we need to see to keep to our net zero targets. So we've got around 450 accredited solar and heat pump installers today. By 2030, that would support 2,000 solar PV jobs and nearly 2,000 heat pump jobs. So the system can support more people in those sectors. We also have 600,000 people with transferable skills from the construction industry. So there is the kind of skill set there. It's about how we look at retraining them, how we look at applying the skills that they have in a slightly different setting to mobilize that workforce. But one of the issues is that there is a lot of training out there, but maybe the pipeline isn't there. So maybe there's not that certainty that those sectors need to invest in that training. And that's one of the reasons why people aren't getting more work done now. So these are some of the barriers that we have identified as we've been looking at this at the region as a whole, and what's working elsewhere in the country, what's working well here. So these are some of the barriers that we look at. So high upfront costs. Funding doesn't often cover all the upfront costs, even if you're in a low-income household. There's limited eligibility for grants if you're not in that low-income bracket. Commercial finance often is unaffordable for a lot of people, and often it's unavailable. It's not necessarily something that you would have a home that would be eligible for, or that you would be eligible for from a finance perspective. So there's often a lot of barriers, just in terms of the upfront cost. Trust is a major piece of this. So that's around installer quality. It's around how disruptive different measures can be for your home. There's also a question mark around the estimated savings that you might get. Does that translate into savings in reality? And if it doesn't, that can then work to reduce the trust in the retrofit programs that might be on offer. Market confidence that I just spoke about. There's a real uncertainty in the demand, and also uncertainty in policy moving forward. So this really limits installer investment in upskilling people or retraining people, and that capacity to deliver what we need in terms of improving our homes. A lot of schemes are really complex as well. There are different eligibility rules for different schemes. Even if you do qualify for grants, there are lots of technical choices to work through. And even those who are most technically minded, there's still a lot of options there, and it's really difficult to navigate. There's a lot of fragmented funding, and there's a lot of finance products available, but they are really difficult to understand, and many don't apply to a lot of the people, particularly in the Northeast. So what's already on offer, and what are we learning from other places? So the Northeast Mayoral Strategic Authority currently offers support already to homes in the region through the Northeast Warm Homes service. So that's a one-stop shop for advice primarily. That's free impartial advice, which can be delivered online, in person. And it also includes connections to trusted local installers. So if you go through that system, you can get a plan for your home, and you can look at what measures you might need to improve your home's energy efficiency, and make it warmer and more comfortable. There is then the option to be linked to a local trusted installer who can deliver all of those things for you, and that part is a paid service for most. Um, there's also guidance on funding and grants that are available on that Warm Homes service. So if you haven't looked at that, please do check it out. It's not something that we run as Urban Foresight, it's something that's run by the Energy Saving Trust with partners on behalf of the North East Mayoral Strategic Authority. But it's something that we fully support. It runs through till March next year. So there's a kind of limited time at the moment to get involved with it. And part of the work that we're doing to develop a strategy for how we deliver retrofit on a more long-term basis is, okay, well, what happens with the one-stop shop, and what might that look like moving forward? So as I say, there's already a range of programs of support that are available. And there's also some upcoming grants. So one of the things that the North East Mayoral Strategic Authority is rolling out later this year, so around September time, is a low interest loan, which is around £1 million of capital intended for that. The idea is that provides a low interest domestic retrofit loan for owner occupiers or for private landlords to install energy efficiency measures or low carbon measures themselves. So that'll be from autumn 2026. Those loans are between £2,000 and £25,000. There's on average, and that interest rate is at 4%. So that's actually out to tender at the moment. There's not a loan provider in place yet. I believe the tender is still open and closes next week. There's more information on that through that link at the bottom of the slide. Obviously, some of these things are still time limited. One of the ideas behind the loan is that it has a more longevity. But a lot of what we see across all these types of programs across the country, and particularly where increasingly we see unsecured or secured loans available, some of these are time-limited grants, or the loans are very difficult to navigate, or they don't apply in your circumstance. And the best practice that we see from elsewhere shows that there's a real value in integrating trusted intermediaries that can guide different households through that entire journey, from advice to installation and to aftercare. And that's what the one-stop shop was really set up to do. The region doesn't need to necessarily replicate everything that's going on elsewhere, but obviously we can learn from approaches that are happening, and the key is around simplicity, trust, and long-term stability. So those existing foundations from the one-stop shop provide a really strong starting point for building something that's more coherent and that takes us beyond 2027 and into the next 3-5 years and beyond that. So how do we start to build a system for our region together? So I said at the beginning, we have been commissioned by the North East Mayoral Strategic Authority to develop this retrofit strategy for the North East. So one of the things that we have is some surveys. So there are surveys if you're a resident, there are surveys if you're a landlord, whether you're in private rented or your social landlord. There's also a survey if you're involved in the retrofit system in any other way. So are you a local business? Are you a local authority? You might be a community organisation, helping to support people in their journeys. There are surveys for all those different sectors. They take around 15 minutes or so to complete. If you're a resident, you have an opportunity to go into a prize draw to win a £100 shopping voucher. So well worth 10 to 15 minutes of your time. Basically, that enables as many people as possible to tell us what you want to see, what you are finding difficult about heating your home, keeping it comfortable, what you've tried and haven't been satisfied with, what you think might work better. And there's also an opportunity to leave your details so that we can contact you and discuss that in more detail if you want, or you can be involved in some of the in-person events, which I'm going to speak about in a moment. So please do click the links to those surveys and give us your thoughts. So alongside that, the whole process of developing a strategy for the Northeast isn't just starting now. It actually started back in November 2025 when the Northeast Mayoral Strategic Authority created the Warm Homes Task Force to oversee this retrofit programme. So that covers the warm homes Northeast Warm Homes Energy Advice and one-stop shop service. And it also covers that low interest loans offer, and it covers this whole strategy development piece. So beneath the task force sit 5 advisory groups. And what we're doing across these advisory groups is really bringing together a lot of the leading lights, the experts in the field across the sector, whether that's in public sector, private sector, third sector. The Mayoral Strategic Authority has convened those leaders to look at all of the different aspects of this strategy that are going to be important. So that is community outreach, engagement, how we improve uptake, it's finance and funding, then that customer pathway, so that customer journey, the retrofit sector capacity and capability, so that's about skills and jobs that we looked at before, and then the strategic governance, how do we actually make a framework that provides support and guidance and links for large sectors of the community, including the missing middle, but that also targets those vulnerable communities, seldom heard voices, and those hard to treat, hard to heat homes. All of those people in the advisory groups have been feeding into the locality assessment, and that document is what we have been working on, that has provided all of that background information that I've presented over the last sort of half an hour. And that's today's webinar today. The next thing that we will be doing is a workshop on the 18th of June. And that will be looking at where the Northeast retrofit system is now. So that's more about what's our starting point and how can we develop a mission statement, a vision statement for what we want to see in the future. So all of that kind of background work has led to building this strategy around one foundation and 5 interconnected pillars that define how retrofit must operate as a system. So we start with the foundation, and that's the home itself. The Northeast has a really diverse and ageing housing stock, as you saw earlier, and much of that is energy inefficient. So what's critical to that is linking fuel poverty, health outcomes, those wider inequalities. So that's the reason that we need a place-based but sort of tailored approach that can be delivered at scale. So that foundation, the home, is underpinning everything. And then we move on to the 5 pillars, which reflect those advisory groups that I spoke about before. So there's the community engagement and uptake, an outreach pillar. So that's looking at that challenge of not just awareness of energy prices, for example, or how to reduce energy. It's actually looking at the demand that's developing and the households, the barriers that households face around trust and cost and complexity. And we know that evidence from elsewhere shows that trusted local intermediaries like community groups, health services are really essential as part of that group, as part of that pillar. So moving on to the second pillar, that's capacity and capability. So we know that there is a bit of a skills gap. We know there are people within the market who can apply their skills within the retrofit sector. There's a lot of SMEs involved with that, and there's a lot of sole traders. There's obviously low confidence at the moment in long-term demand, so without certainty, businesses won't invest in those skills. So scaling retrofit requires that coordinated training pathway and stable pipeline of work, and that's what that pillar two is about. Third pillar is the customer pathways. So that's reflecting on the customer journey being fragmented and not really linear, and there's a high dropout of people who might consider some sort of home improvement measures, but they drop out for various different reasons. So households have to navigate different schemes and different providers, and the solution needs to be a bit more integrated. There needs to be more end-to-end pathways that combine all these different pieces of advice and finance and installers with independent support and tailored routes for different groups. So fourth is then leading into the finance and funding side of things. The system currently relies heavily on short-term grants. They're fragmented. They don't really support that kind of whole house approach. There's also a really big gap, as we heard before, around the missing middle. Those people who aren't eligible for grants, but really not able to self-fund either. And the direction of travel is moving towards that blended finance model embedded in trusted delivery pathways. So finally, in delivering a strategy that lasts for the last 3 to 5 years and beyond, strategic governance is a really important part of that. So there's strong policy alignment at the moment across the health sector, across local authorities, around improving homes. But responsibilities are really spread across different sectors. So they're spread across housing, health, energy, skills sectors. So there's an opportunity here for there to be coordinated system lead and joined up accountable governance. And that's something that we'll be exploring over the course of the next few months with our advisory groups, with the task force, but also with those people participating in the in-person sessions. So we're moving really from a kind of set of disconnected programs that aren't really functioning ideally in any part of the country at the moment to hopefully a more coordinated and place-based system where all of those different 5 pillars work together on that foundation to enable us to transition to better homes for people at an earlier point in time. So you can help us deliver this strategy. Today's webinar is today, and this gives you an introduction to the state of the area. We'll be delivering a workshop on the 18th of June. That's in Newcastle. We're looking at where is the retrofit system now. There will be a second workshop, which will also be in person in a different location. And that's how do we make the North East retrofit ready? How do we get from where we are now, where we want to be in the future? What do we need to do to make that future happen? And then how do we build it together is our third and final workshop. That'll be early October. And that's looking at what sort of actions we need to put in place, who owns those actions, how can we start implementing things, what groups do we need to look at more closely, what organisations do we need to pull in. And then our advisory groups and our task force will look at prioritising those actions to develop a draft strategy by the end of November, which will be a final strategy and launched in early 2027. So that upcoming session is 18th of June. That's 2 weeks today. That's in Newcastle. We're looking at what are the problems we're really trying to solve for people in place. What is it about the North East that shapes what will or won't work? Who is it really that we need to be focusing on? We've got a really clear idea, I think, of the starting points on that. And who are the priorities in this? Who do we need to be focusing on in the immediate term? So whether you're a landlord, you're a resident, if you're involved in the supply chain in any way, if you're concerned about improving homes in the North East, you are very welcome at the session. We do have really limited numbers, and we've already got quite a lot of people signed up from various different organisations. So let us know as soon as possible if you want to be on that session. I will send a link round to everyone signed up to this webinar already at the after the close of this webinar, so you have a direct link you can sign up to that. That session on the 18th will also allow you to kind of connect with other organisations, individuals, peers that are part of that retrofit ecosystem, and you'll be looking at how to develop your ideas for domestic retrofit to inform that regional strategy. We're bringing a really wide range of voices together in the whole region, so we really want as much input from every different sector as possible. And I think that's me. Oliver, do we have any questions in the chat?
I think lots of them have been answered as we go. There's one just come in here from Chris, who's asking, there are a lot of properties, particularly coastal and rural, that have issues with the roofs, which need to be rectified prior to solar PV installation. Will there be a fund available for enabling works so those individual cases don't miss out?
Yes, I believe so one of the things is the warm homes plan that a lot of people will have seen recently has come out. So there's a lot in there about future funding and what will replace current schemes such as the Warm Homes Local Grant or ECO as we move out of the end of 2026. So there is still uncertainty on exactly what that would cover. My understanding is the low interest loan has that would enable you to cover some of that remedial work that would be alongside in putting in place an improvement. So that's part of what they are what the Mayoral Street Authority are looking at as part of the low interest loan. There's more information about that on the link on the relevant slide.
Great. And I assume that that also applies to Chris's second question, which is about funding to remediate damp and mold prior to wall insulation.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think we will have to come away and just double check that and come back to you on that. But it's a good point because a lot of these grant funding um, opportunities over the last few years have not funded that sort of thing. So that is one of the issues that we obviously have come across in the locality assessment process itself, is that quite often one of the barriers to moving forward is having to put up the finances for those remedial works before any grants can be um, can be acquired. So if you want to put in place solar panels, for example, even if I mean there's no grant available for solar panels for most properties at the moment anyway, but if you wanted to put in place solar panels but you needed to repair your roof in order to do so, actually suddenly the cost shoots up, and you're right, there's not the provision there um to fund that in the current system. So that's why we have this kind of fragmented approach, and we're looking at how do we make those funding opportunities a bit more aligned, and how do we make that clearer for the average household.
Great. And there's also a question from Chris about the inclusion of a tariff switching service to ensure that tenants are maximising savings post installation.
That's actually So I think that might be involved in it. That might be part and parcel of the advice that you get through the in terms of advice on switching. That's something that the people through the Warm Homes Northeast Warm Homes service can support with. There is not a specific tariff switching service that sits within that sort of low income loans bracket. There are various different sort of comparison websites out there that do that sort of switching for you, and they were really popular before the last kind of energy crisis back in 2022, and they are resurfacing. Um, but we can check whether that's going to be part of things moving forward. And if not, it's something that will be built into our actions as part of the in-person development sessions.
Great. Hannah has asked a two-parter. Firstly, can you please give more details of how you calculated the 140,000 households figure for those who are most vulnerable, as this figure feels low for the region, including all vulnerability factors? Secondly, for the low interest loans that are due to be launched later this year, is this through the Warm Homes Plan funding or is this from the North East MSA? At Citizens Advice, we are currently asking for a mixture of grants and low interest loans for the missing middle households through the Warm Homes Plan. Um, I'll take the first part of that
Yeah.
regarding the 140,000 households. The way that those figures have been calculated is through the creation of a set of indices. So that's pulling from government data, a number of key indicators around respiratory health and deprivation and a number of other indicators. The 140,000 number is the number of households in the top 20% of that index. So that's not to say that there aren't vulnerabilities elsewhere. That is just to say that from using that index, there are 140,000 households that fall into the top 20% of LSOAs when looking at that index. So we acknowledge that there are vulnerabilities elsewhere and that it's not that some communities are vulnerable and some aren't. But that is the number falling into the top 20% there. And I think on the low interest loans being through the Warm Homes Plan, Annalisa, this is separate, is my
No, it's
understanding.
directly. So
Ah,
this is something that the North East Mayoral Strategic Authority are tendering directly themselves now. So that is a that will be a contract that's in place to deliver those low interest loans primarily through till March 2028, but a little bit beyond that as well. So it's something that the MSA have looked at directly. So it's not something that we're waiting for the Warm Homes Plan to provide additional information on. It's there. It's in the pipeline. There'll be a provider in place in the coming months to do that. There's more information. We can send you the link to that. I think it's on one of the slides actually, but there's a really helpful slide deck that goes through what that low interest loan offers. As well as some of the other things that the MSA are doing at the moment. Just actually going back to that point, I've checked on the low interest loan and whether it covers remediation works and things, and it does. So remediation works required to enable installation where installation also occurs. So that's any insulation, that's solar PV, solar thermal, batteries, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, glazing and ventilation, where they're also installed alongside insulation. So if there are remediation works included, that would be covered by those loans. I think the detail of that is more in the terms and conditions within the document itself. And I
great.
can see another question from Chris now. Assuming a framework of retrofit installers will be tendered to deliver all of this once funding has been secured. So that's it's a really good question actually. There's currently in the Warm Homes service, there is a provider, Warmworks, who delivers installations in conjunction with local installers. So that is already available through the Warm Homes service. One of the things that we are looking at with the MSA is the devolution package, so that integrated settlement, what is coming to the region, how that can best be used. And the idea is that this strategy develops a framework so that that funding can be used in conjunction with other funding pots, and it can be best utilised and it can be utilised to its full. So that may or may not include a further tender for delivery of those measures. It may look like something else, and that's something that will come out of this strategy development and the actions that are developed towards the end of that autumn period. Is that it for our questions?
There are no more questions in the chat currently.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Um, Super. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you ever so much for attending our session, everyone. As I say, we have recorded this. It'll be available so you can watch it back. Oh, and I have seen an extra question come through. Just people, we'll address that first, and then I'll close. Um, Will there be a redress scheme available in case there are issues with retrofit installations? So this is one of the things that we have been discussing within our advisory groups, and it is one of those things that we will explore more in those in-person sessions. It's one of the things that's been highlighted already through the surveys, but also through that wide group of people that we're talking to in the task force and the advisory groups. How do you get what does independent checks mean? Who does independent checks? Where does that sit? Does that sit within the MSA itself? Does it sit outside the MSA? Are there redress schemes already? What kind of accreditation should people be looking for? What's helpful for installers? What's helpful for households? These are all questions that we're exploring as part of this strategy development process. So in the case of the Warm Homes service already, Warmworks is in there as the delivery partner, and they check the installations that are done by local installers. So there is that kind of level of independent check that goes on within the Warm Home service itself. What that looks like on a wider scale, when we're talking about delivery, either through a one-stop shop continuation or a new version of a one-stop shop or a completely different system, is something that we'll explore in more detail and get feedback on as we progress through the next few months, and in that, particularly in sort of session 2 and 3 of those in-person workshops. So I think that is the last question. Yeah, and totally agree, Hannah, that building trust is, I think, one of the things that we talk about in with everybody we've talked to, regardless of whether they are a large landlord, they're a social housing landlord, they are a one-man band delivering solar panel installations. Every single person who we've spoken to has really emphasised that need to build trust and confidence, and I think that's a really cool thread that will run through this. So with that note, and I think a really positive note to end on, thank you very much to everyone. I've left my details there if you want to contact me directly. Otherwise, we'll be sending a link round with those survey links and a link to the upcoming in-person session if you want to join us. There are very few places, so do respond quickly if you'd like to join. And enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you.